Well, how's everybody doing tonight? We appreciate your patience as we've gotten these last few details together. And also thank you for coming out on what is, again, a rather chilly night. This first event that we had in this series last month was, of course, on one of those coldest days of the year. So we were thanking people for coming out in 8-degree weather after almost 60-degree weather 10 days ago or so. I was hoping tonight might be a little bit warmer than it is. But again, thank you for bearing the weather and coming to spend your evening with us. I know we also have folks that will be joining us virtually. So again, we want to thank and share appreciation for everyone that's participating. We have a nice crowd here, but I know we'll have some other folks joining online as well. So to get things started, I'll introduce myself. My name is Jordan Larson. I work with Ann Arbor's Office of Sustainability and Innovations on the engagement team. Again, I want to welcome you to what is the second session of our 2026 Sustainability Forum series. We're super grateful to be able to work with the library here and be in this amazing space. And this series brings together city staff, community leaders, other change makers from the Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County area to share their inspiring sustainability work in our community and to help residents understand how they can take action as well. And tonight we are particularly excited to share Leading by Example, Ann Arbor's Municipal Operations. So before we launch into the agenda for this evening, I just want to orient folks to where we are in the series overall. Again, this is our second session. These events run monthly, January through May, on the last Tuesday of the month. So the next event that we'll have will be here on March 31st. And this event will be focused on climate action that renters can take, and talking a little bit about the recently passed green rental housing ordinance and a bunch of other cool stuff. So we hope you'll join us for that. We will be rounding out the series in April and May with the April session celebrating the A2ZERO Community Cookbook. I'm especially excited for this event. If you haven't had a chance to check out the cookbook, that's going to be a great one. And then in May, we're going to be talking about building social resilience and some of the projects and programs that people can get involved in. So that's what's coming up ahead. But for this evening in our time together, I'll provide a very brief bit of framing and just kind of introduction for what we're going to be covering today. Then we're going to have 10 to 15-minute quick presentations from our panelists, which we're super excited to have with us here tonight. And then we'll have just a few minutes of open Q&A for audience members if you have any questions for any of the panelists. And then I'll share a couple of resources and some information about how to stay engaged to close us out. Now, to provide a little bit of framing for tonight, as some of you may be familiar, A2ZERO is Ann Arbor's plan to achieve a just transition to community-wide carbon neutrality by 2030. This plan is arranged through 7 strategies. It includes powering our electrical grid with 100% renewable energy, switching our vehicles and appliances to electric power, significantly improving energy efficiency in our buildings, reducing vehicle miles traveled by 50%, a bunch of actions around the way we use and reuse materials, and enhancing the resilience of our people in place. There are, I think, 44 defined actions and many more that are also kind of happening but not defined in the plan. And so this is a very ambitious project. And for this effort to be community-wide, we understand as a city that we have to lead by example. We can't expect to make this transformation happen in our community if we aren't also deeply embedding these strategies and this work into how the city operates and functions. And so this is why we are particularly excited to kind of pull back the curtain and share some exciting ways that the city is incorporating A2ZERO into our municipal operations, and really highlight some of the hard work, which is often unseen, that keeps Ann Arbor running smoothly, safely, and sustainably. So we're really excited to share this with you this evening. And with this, I'm now going to do a quick introduction of our panelists before we go into their presentations. So I'm excited to introduce Simi Bar. Simi has worked with OSI since 2020 after finishing graduate school at the University of Michigan. He leads OSI's municipal operations team, which works to lessen the environmental impact of city facilities and its fleet. Much of his day-to-day work involves managing energy projects at city facilities, such as on-site solar generating systems. Outside of work, he enjoys spending time outside and playing guitar. Thanks, Simi, for being with us tonight. Next up, we have Stephen. He is an electrical vehicle coordinator for the city's Office of Sustainability and Innovations. Stephen is working primarily with a federal grant to deploy convenient, reliable, and affordable EV charging throughout Ann Arbor. Stephen has previously worked for electric vehicle startups, local elections, and sustainable initiatives with Costco Wholesale. Stephen graduated from Central Michigan University with a degree in economics and political science with a focus on the environment and sustainability. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Chief Anderson. Andre C. Anderson is the police chief of Ann Arbor's police department. He previously served as the executive assistant police chief with the city of Tempe in Arizona. As a police leader, Andre has served in law enforcement for more than 34 years and in leadership roles for over 22 years. He has been fortunate to serve every leadership command in a modern-day police department. Where am I here? From officer to detective, commander, assistant chief, executive deputy chief, and police chief. Chief Anderson has also led community policing and community engagement squads and has taught and traveled abroad, helping organizations learn the concepts of community policing, and serves as a special assistant to the president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. He holds a master's degree in education and leadership from Northern Arizona. Chief Anderson is married, an avid chess player, and an NFL fan. He is led by faith and enjoys making cheesesteaks and spending time with family and friends. Thank you, Chief, for joining us this evening. Lastly, but certainly not least, I would like to introduce Brett Leonard. Brett's public service story began with a degree in urban and regional planning from Eastern Michigan University. From there, Brett traveled the long mile to Ypsilanti City Hall, where he oversaw programs including the Downtown Development Authority, Historic District Commission, Economic Development Corporation, and other redevelopment activities. With a desire to foster regional solutions to complex challenges, he then moved through various roles at Washtenaw County around land use planning, energy efficiency, economic development, affordable housing, and more. For the past decade, Brett has served as manager for planning for the city of Ann Arbor. Here, Brett is lucky to work with an incredible team to undertake comprehensive planning, land development, rezoning and zoning compliance, and historic preservation activities for the city. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining us, and I can't wait to hear from them all. And with that, I am going to pass it off to both Simi and Stephen, who are together going to tell us a little bit about the city's efforts to decarbonize buildings, put solar on city facilities, and a little bit about EV charging. Should we continue to use this mic, or is this one working too? Perfect.
All right, thank you, Jordan, and thank you, everyone, for attending this evening. Excited to talk a little bit about what we've been doing in the municipal operations space within the Office of Sustainability and Innovations and the City of Ann Arbor as a whole. As Jordan said, I'm joined here by my colleague on the municipal operations team, Stephen Jadoyan, who is our electric vehicle coordinator. And I am the senior analyst for municipal operations, leading the municipal operations team. Generally, we're tasked with reducing the environmental impact of city operations, our facilities, and our fleet. So that means energy efficiency projects at our city facilities, fleet electrification. We do grant writing and identification, work on energy projects like solar and battery storage at our city facilities, and implement public EV charging infrastructure as well. So sustainability action in Ann Arbor has been around for decades, as many of us know. This timeline takes us back to the early 1980s, where we're founding of our Energy Commission. Later on in the 2000s, we implement a green fleet strategy to start looking at not just our buildings, but our city fleet and what we can do to lessen the environmental impact of those vehicles. And leading up to 2019, City Council declared a climate emergency, after which the Office of Sustainability and Innovations produced, with the collaboration of community support, our A2ZERO plan, which was then unanimously adopted by City Council in 2020. That plan, as Jordan said, involves 7 strategies, which break down into a host of actions. And really, these first 3 strategies are where a lot of our municipal operations work lies. So strategy 1 is powering our grid with 100% clean and renewable energy. Strategy 2 involves switching our appliances and vehicles from fossil fuels to electric. And then strategy 3 involves significantly improving the energy efficiency of our buildings, appliances, recreational sites, etc. So between those 3 things, we're really encompassing a lot of what it takes to decarbonize those municipal operations. Taking a step back, what do we mean when we say municipal operations? I say the fleet and the facilities, but what are we really talking about here? The city of Ann Arbor has quite the portfolio of facilities. We've got 160 plus sites, buildings, and facilities. These range from, relatively simple park sites to really big, complex industrial facilities like our water and wastewater treatment plants. We've got office buildings like our election center, city hall. We've got our Wheeler Service Center that provides a lot of our public works support throughout the city. We also power all our street lights, traffic signals. And then beyond those simple parks, we also have some pretty significant energy users in there, including things like ice rinks and pools. So really looking at and the impact of those. Beyond that, we have 362 vehicles and fuel-burning assets in our fleet. About 200 of those are what we call our light fleet, which is about everything up to a mid-size van. Everything above that is going to be part of our heavier fleet. Amongst all our facilities and fleet, we're using around 33 million kilowatt hours annually. That can fluctuate year to year, but it's about the equivalent of what 4,000 average homes in Michigan use in an entire year. As far as natural gas goes, we're using about the equivalent of 1,000 homes in Michigan. And then with over those 360-ish assets in the fleet, we're using another 250,000 gallons of gasoline and diesel annually. So that's what we're looking at as a municipal operations team as to how we can reduce these, because obviously that electricity, natural gas, and gasoline and diesel all have greenhouse gas impacts when they're used. To break it down a bit further, just looking at what the electricity breakdown looks like amongst city facilities, really our industrial users, our water and wastewater treatment plants, make up the bulk of that electricity. Not just the plants themselves, but we also have infrastructure throughout the city, pumps, lift stations, all these things use energy to move our waste and our water to the plants that treat those effectively. So back to strategy 1, now that we sort of know what we're talking about when we say municipal facilities, when we go back to strategy 1, we're looking at powering our facilities with 100% clean and renewable energy. So we've been working hard on that OSI since 2021. We put out our first RFP for solar designs for solar at city facilities. Since that time, we've had over a dozen solar installations go online at city facilities, and those have provided just last year around 945 megawatt hours, which is around the equivalent of what 100 homes would generate, or what they would use, and that continues to grow. So we've got, those are just the arrays that are online. We have multiple more in progress and planned that we're really excited to get started on. So some of those projects you may have seen around the city, and I urge you to keep an eye out if you haven't, but those projects have included things like solar carports with public EV charging, rooftop solar systems on our existing buildings, ground mounts at certain facilities. We've even relocated one array at a facility when it was being transitioned to another use. And we've done battery storage projects for resilience and peak shaving. So here on the right, we can see an array that's at the Ann Arbor Senior Center near Burns Park. And I've also included a snapshot of our monitoring software from just today where we can see the various sustainability assets that are there. Sorry if it's a little bit small, but what we can see is the solar array there generating around 11 kilowatts, of which about 2.5 are going in to power the building. The rest of that is used to power our battery to 100%, and the remainder is being put back onto the grid where the city is being compensated financially for that production. So pretty exciting, and then we also have this battery at the facility that in the event of power outages, that facility can continue operating and providing the services that it's there for. I've got some other pictures of sites you may have seen around the city, but I'll just shout out a few. This is our carport at Fuller Park, one of the city's larger parks electricity users because of the large pool there. We were excited to put in a large carport there in 2024. This is Burr Park, where we have an ice rink and a pool, and there's a rooftop mounted array on top of the ice rink. We've done something similar at Vets Park, where there's also an ice rink and a large carport. This is our Gallup canoe livery, where we put in a really nice solar pergola. And these two projects are both in progress. So both of these pictures have been taken in the last 2 weeks or so. But on the left, this is Bicentennial Park. We've been excited to work with our parks team to install this carport. And they are working hard on a splash pad over there. So we're really excited to see some of the improvements coming to that facility. And I mentioned the relocation of an array. On the right, we can see a carport that is behind our Fire Station 3 on Jackson Road. So that carport previously was at 4th and Catherine, sort of closer to the farmer's market. And when the DDA sold that lot to the Housing Commission, there was the opportunity to repurpose that carport. So we were able to have a really great collaboration where we were, have been able to relocate the carport and put it to good use rather than, taking it down and either it ending up in a landfill or sitting at our public works facility. And we also have a couple really large projects that are incoming. So over 1.5 megawatts, including what we see here at our wastewater recovery facility, which will have a large rooftop mounted system as well as battery storage for peak shaving, and a large ground mount system. This is around 1 megawatt, which is going to go at our Wheeler Public Works facility on Stone School Road. So both of these projects are in progress, and construction is slated to begin later this year. So that takes us through that first strategy of renewable energy. Next, I want to quickly touch on reducing energy waste at city facilities, and that's sort of that third strategy 3 of A2ZERO around energy efficiency. So we've worked hard on various initiatives reducing energy waste around the city. Those have included things like converting streetlights to LEDs whenever possible. Over 4,000 bulbs were transitioned in 2025. Those are, again, just streetlights. We have done the same thing at many of our city facilities. We also look at upgrading our building automation systems to improve the efficiency of how our buildings operate. We are currently engaged in a utility bill tracking project where we're getting much more clarity on how our buildings are using energy on a month-to-month basis, so we can identify if there are major swings and things like that. And then better tracking of what's really going on in our buildings, again, through that utility bill tracking, but also through things like decarbonization audits at our city facilities and through building benchmarking, which is also underway. Here on the right, we can see a fun project that I was excited about at our wastewater recovery facility. The team over there converted a UV disinfection system over to a higher efficiency alternative. With that came really significant electricity savings, and I believe it was estimated to save around 800,000 kilowatt hours annually, which is really significant. And we also just received over $80,000 in rebates from DTE for that project. So really commendable to the wastewater staff for their hard work on reducing that energy waste where possible. With that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Stephen. He's going to discuss a little bit how the municipal operations team impacts our fleet electrification and public EV charging. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Stephen. I'm the electric vehicle coordinator for the city, and I just wanted to touch on some of the work that Simi has been focusing on and that I've been also helping out with in terms of fleet electrification. So overall, right now, the city has about 90 electric city fleet vehicles, 40% of which are those light fleet electrified. So we have a larger fleet of about, I would say, what's the total number? Is it about 200?
In the light fleet, around
Yeah.
200.
Okay, so about 40% of those are already electrified. So we've made some really great progress with the city as far as electrifying those light vehicles. And right now, we're starting to approach some of the tougher to electrify aspects in terms of heavy fleet. So we're talking refuse vehicles, we're talking about forklifts, and we are trying to do some pilot projects as far as seeing what could work and what might not work. And right now, you may have seen an electrified refuse truck in your neighborhood, and they're very quiet and they work out really well. So this kind of work helps to expand charging in the city-owned facilities, but also public charging as well. Now, why are we doing this? Right here, we have what's called the S-curve. This is a adoption trend with new technology, new markets. And right now, as you can see, the United States is at about 10% of EV sales. We're a bit behind other countries, but even though we're early on right now, we are going to be reaching an inflection point eventually. You know, it's not a matter of if, but when. And other countries have been successful early on because they've been able to break through this chicken and egg scenario that's happening with electric vehicles. So right now, there's a lack of robust EV charging throughout your neighborhood, through your city. So that kind of deters people from buying an electric vehicle. But then when it comes time to expanding the network, there might not be enough perceived demand for charging for electric vehicles. So, you know, it's a scenario where it might, you know, defeat itself. But what we have to do is break through that mold and bring out more charging stations to encourage people and show that it's easy and accessible to have charging stations nearby. And that's kind of where the city's efforts are moving in. We're breaking the mold. We're helping to build out a robust public charging network. Now, looking at some of the work that's already been done, Arbor definitely hits above its weight compared to the state. Right now, we have almost 14% of EVs as registered vehicles. Michigan is still about 4%, but you know, Ann Arbor's making a great mode for having electrified vehicles. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about expanding our public charging infrastructure. So right now, we've been focusing a lot on city facilities. We're looking at public parking garages. We're looking at parks. We have fast chargers at City Hall. And the city has been able to accomplish roughly 67 city-owned charging stations. And that work has helped us expand more into like the public realm to allow the public to charge at city facilities as well. And so the map on the right, there's different regions that we've been focusing on, and these are our focus areas as far as expanding charging networks. So part of the work that I've been doing is through a federal grant called the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant, which will allow the city to build about 50 charging stations, both fast chargers and level 2s. And the spirit of the grant is to help build a convenient, reliable, and affordable charging network throughout the community. And we want to do this in as fair of a way as possible. Right now, the market has there's gaps in charging station availability depending on what neighborhood you're in. And again, going back to that chicken and egg scenario, it deters people from making that switch to charging or to electric vehicles because there's a lack of charging station in their neighborhood. So what we've been doing is we have these focus areas, and in the dark blue you can see right here, we're looking at neighborhoods who have been historically left out of the accessibility for charging stations based on the Washtenaw County Opportunity Index. So that's looking at things like median household income, job availability, poverty levels, just essentially seeing like, how successful is the neighborhood and how much of a chance do you have there. So we're looking at building out in some of those areas, in middle class and working class areas, just to be able to say that we have filled the gap in the charging station availability. Now, as far as, relaying the spirit of the grant to, our focus areas are twofold. So we're looking at high impact and high equity. So when we say high impact and high visibility, we're looking at retail locations, places where people normally commute through on their, in their daily routine or weekly routine. So we're looking at major transportation corridors throughout Ann Arbor. That's essentially where a lot of the fast charging would be. But we also want to make sure that this is fair and broad as possible. And we think that having it in a more community-oriented locations, such as libraries and parks and community centers, I think that will definitely fit the puzzle pieces together in terms of filling the gap for charging stations. So it's definitely twofold. You want to have high impact, high visibility, and a high community benefit. And the way that I like to think about building out the charging network is, if you're an EV driver, you want to always think to yourself, hey, I have a robust charging network. I have a public charger that I could use in my day-to-day life. So that's how we're going about it. And if you have any questions or like to bounce ideas, the door is always open. Simi and I are both working hard on this, and we're excited to see what the future holds.
Thank you, Simi and Stephen. I don't know about anyone else. If you get excited when you see the electric refuse truck driving around, it can be hard to spot because, as Stephen said, it's very quiet. But if you do see a big garbage truck driving by that's very quiet, you can add that to your city sustainability bingo card. So thank you both for sharing those updates. Again, next up, I am super excited to invite Chief Anderson to come to the stage, who's going to share a little bit of information about the police department's efforts and the ways that the police department helps keep Ann Arbor safe, which is super important for our resilience goals. Chief Anderson, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Nice job, Simi and Steve. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to talk a little bit about the police department. And I'm hoping at some point, we'll all be available to answer some questions. So, I want to talk to you about our patrol deployment, squad integrity, and our beat officers. And, there are some kind of unique names that we use, but I'm going to make an attempt to try to explain some of the things that we're doing here in Ann Arbor. And so, one question one might ask is, what is a beat officer? And so, does anyone have any idea? You do? What is it? Yeah, foot on bicycle, right? I like that. See that? Good answer. The beat officers do work on foot. They're on bicycle. They're assigned to a geographic area. And so, as you can see on the map here, we have what we call an Adam area, a Bravo area, B, a David and Charlie area. And the officers work in a minimum of 2 officers in a beat for the most part. And they are scheduled each workday, 24/7 hours. And those officers are there basically to respond to calls for service. But more importantly, their job is to build trust and maintain positive relationships in the community. But a beat is designed oftentimes for officers to get a fast response. So generally speaking, the smaller the beat, the faster the response is. In fact, you may not see this here, but we just included what was called an Edward beat because we were having some challenges in the downtown area. So we created another beat and we placed other officers inside that beat. But just as you indicated that our officers' jobs are to get out in the cars, get around and talk to people and get to know people. And while they're doing that, they're creating collaborative relationships with the people they serve while also implementing problem-solving solutions. Now, we also have what's called a downtown collaborative, which is kind of a multi-disciplinary partnership that we have. And with this, these are police officers that are working in the downtown area. They work with the University of Michigan Police there, and they work around the campus. And we work together in order to address some of the concerns that we have. And oftentimes, those concerns are really like what we call quality of life issues. We have many individuals that are unhoused that are downtown, so we see them from time to time. And it is a challenge in terms of how the police may be able to address the concerns. So we have a balanced approach. One thing is we work with, our community mental health. We work with our supportive services inside with the city, and we are supportive connections inside the city. And then we also have the police officers go out and they try to find individuals that are downtown housing and other things in order to assist them. And sometimes, quite frankly, some people that are downtown commit crimes, and the police officers have to make arrests from time to time. But that's not really our primary response. We never think that we can solve problems through arrests. So our police officers are downtown. We have a small kind of office that we call the Maynard office that's downtown, where we have some police officers work out of there. And many of our officers are walking around on foot. So I think, and I hope we'll have this shared video that can kind of work here. That'll tell you a little bit about our vision. So let's see if this goes. The link did not come up, huh? All righty. Well, not this time.
Folks that are interested, maybe just give us a phone, we can share it with them afterwards.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And also, I can likely pull it up here from the internet. But let me go to a couple other things. So our video will talk a little bit about our values. And so when I first came to the city of Ann Arbor, we had some conversations with respect to what are the values of the police department. And I was asked that as an applicant, tell me what your vision is. And what I told, the people in the community and our police department is that, I'm not going to provide a vision without actually having a conversation with people in the community, because anyone can come up with a vision. But really, our vision is a shared vision. So I went out and met with many people throughout the community. I met with many of our police officers. I met with many city employees. And then collectively, we came up with our values and what we thought was a shared vision. And so when we looked at it, our values were about a leadership mindset. Because, as a police chief or in any leadership, you're not going to be there forever. And so I told people right from the beginning, as soon as I came in, I wanted to start developing a succession plan that allowed for leaders to come in after me. And so you want to get people in the right mindset, knowing that they know that it's built around the culture, not me. And so that was really important. The other one was a growth mindset, because we wanted to get police officers to understand what growth was like. The city of Ann Arbor is growing. The surrounding area is growing. We have a lot of venues that are taking place and businesses that are coming here. And so I want us to understand how important it is to be professional and know that growth means that we need to develop a better way to do our jobs, which means continuous learning, putting officers in training, just getting people to understand their cultural competencies in the evolving world. Things are changing. And then we wanted to work as best as we can on being effective in communication. And that means oftentimes us getting things out to the media, getting things out through social network, and getting things out through the organization and kind of talk to our employees. But then, our values came about really finding people that on something you can't really teach people, and that's how having passion. Because you have passion, I'm sure, in the things that you do. So in order to be good at anything you do, you need to have passion, care about your job, care about the people, and make sure that we're bringing in highly skilled professionals, people that really see their job as not the way that they earn a living, but the way they're able to serve the community by getting people that are skillful, that understand their craft, that are able to provide a service to the organization. And we wanted us, and as you see here, we wanted people that are relational and objective, because sometimes the police department, and many times people see them as kind of myopic. They follow a lot of rules. They're stringent, they're stressed, and they just do all these little things that sometimes can really irritate the public. And so what I wanted our police department to do is kind of relax the way that they do things. And I learned that we have a Grace here. That's her name, right? That is your name. And so that has a lot to do with the police department, because when we talk about relational, I talk a lot about extending grace. Because if the police officers don't extend grace to each other, and they don't extend grace to each other, to the community, that's a problem. So I'm teaching them to have grace with one another and stop being so judgmental, stop being so myopic, so that when you come out in the community, you're not as myopic. You learn to have grace. People, we're imperfect. We're going to make mistakes, and so are the police officers. They make mistakes too, because we're humans, and we're living in an imperfect world. So having that mindset and talking to them about that in order to develop what we call a team of teams. We want to be a team that is not just a team, but the best team there is. And so shooting for that goal is really critical for us in the police department, because I talk about teamwork, and I use a lot of sports analogy when I'm really talking to my employees about different things. One of the things that didn't come out in my background is that I was a professional athlete. I was a professional boxer. And so, I know a lot about sports, right? Because, those are things you have to understand. Even though boxing doesn't seem like a team sport, it is a team sport, because there's a lot of people that have to prepare you for where you're going. And I talk about those concepts and how you move things forward. And then we developed what was called our strategic pillars, which were the 5 C's. And they were built around what we thought was important to the community. Just developing strong community partnerships where we're working with individuals and groups throughout the community in order for us to be successful. And as we talk about cultivating leaders, getting these leaders and getting them developed, as I talked about, we want them to see the emerging leaders. When you come to a police department from the outside, like I have, you find that there are a lot of people that internally that can do an exceptional job. Some of them are just sitting there waiting for this opportunity for you to actually give them a chance and put them in, coach, put me in there so that I can show you that I can perform well. But you got to reach out to them and cultivate those leaders. And also we had to celebrate service, because service is important. And I talk to our guys, have levity. We have a new commander that's been promoted, and he wanted to really look sharp, so he brought his boots in, and he's had them in his office, and he's shining his shoes. And they say, well, the police officers should be serious all the time. But what's happened over the last couple of days is I've been having like fine Dunlap's boots, because he leaves his boots there, and then I hide his boots all over the place. So he's like searching all over, where is that boot? The chief moved my boot again. And so we don't always want to be so serious all the time and take yourself so serious. We need levity, because that's what makes your job fun. And you got to celebrate service. We also want to find creative solutions. We want to look for solutions by working with partners, working with you in the community, so that when we go out and look at trying to be problem-solving partners, it's not just the police that are solving problems. The one thing that's really challenging for a police department is trying to solve problems without asking the community or the people that are affected. We're trying to solve this. We think we know how to do it, but sometimes police officers are always around police officers. So then they start to think a lot, and they harmonize their thought process. So what I try to tell our police officers is just have a healthy balance. Just be around other people. You don't have to be around police officers all the time. And develop community connections, because community connections requires you to think differently. And that's what we want you to do. We want our officers to think differently. We don't want them to think like cops all the time. And lastly, many of my officers know that our philosophy, and this is my own philosophy, is find a way to ken with the right mindset. And what I tell people when they come around my leadership is that, sometimes in leadership, or in positions, people are oftentimes selfish, right? And I say, we're just selfish people. We just can't help for being selfish sometimes. But I tell them it's all right to be selfish if you have this in mind, as long as you tie your selfishness to the overall good of the organization. So if you have good characters that cause you to be a giving person, or sometimes you just want to think about what's right for yourself, does that equate to the organization? And how does that make the organization better? And sometimes that's a challenge when you're getting people to think about humility and things of that nature. So I try to harness that. With my employees in the leadership, one of the things we're all proud of is our children, for those that have children. And I talk about having the can do it. And I give them a story about one of my daughters. I have two daughters and one son. And I told them that one of my daughters, when she was going to college, I sent my daughter to a historical black university. Now that sounds strange because in the community that we grew up, there wasn't a lot of black people. And so I said, you got to get around people so you can get a different part of your culture. And my daughter's like, well, I'm around our relatives. I'm like, no, you need to be around other people. And so I sent her to Texas Southern. And when she got there, she was around a lot of different people that kind of looked like her. And she decided that she said she wanted to win the beauty pageant. And so my daughter, who got an academic scholarship as well as a cheer scholarship, I talked to her about that. And I said, Denise, when you're in high school, right, there was a lot of drama around this cheer stuff, It just seemed like it was ongoing. Now you want to jump back into it. Do you really want to do that? And she says, yeah, I am, Dad. I'm going to continue to do it, but I'm going to win this scholarship. So I said, okay, what's your plan? And she says, I'm going to win this because it's going to help me get another scholarship to go to, she wanted to go to the University of London, which she did. But I tell this story because when she was part of this, this plan in terms of trying to win this pageant, she actually did win the pageant. But when she was in front of the dais, and there was like 3 or 4 of them, they asked her a number of questions. And one of the questions they asked her was about, in this country, should you speak English or Spanish? That's what they asked her. And so I was listening to my daughter, and we're from Arizona, and my daughter answered the question in fluent Spanish because she speaks both Spanish and English. And she actually speaks 6 different languages. And so when she answered that question, she started speaking in Spanish. And then she said, in this country, we should speak English, primarily because when you go to other countries, you have to learn the dialect of that country in order to be successful. And being successful in this country, you have to learn how to communicate with people, but also understand how important it is. But what she said was, having the right mindset is what my dad taught me. And he told me that, really, if given the choice between 2 things, do them both if you can. Never get locked. Never get locked into anything. And I always tell my employees that, if you have an opportunity to do the right things with the right mindset, you don't have to pick one or the other. You don't have to pick 1, 2, or 3. Do them all if you can. And so having that right mindset is really important. And it's always think that you can do it. I always tell them, and I'm sure you tell your family members the same thing. And I tell my kids, I always tell them, you know what? Let me hear what you have to say. You know what? I think you can do that. In fact, I know you can do it. Do it. What's your plan? I always tell people, what's your plan? Let's hear it. Okay? I'll support your plan. You can do it. And it's the same with our police officers. We should explain to them, if you got something that you need to do in the community or you think is important, you have the passion, you can do it. You have the latitude in your beats. The police officers in their beats are like the police chiefs of their particular area. We want them to cultivate leadership. We want them to be solution-oriented, and we want them to work with the people they serve. So our mission, quite frankly, is to provide protection, right, and service to all. It's really just a simple mission. Just protect everybody, not one segregated community, not one race, not one ethnicity, not any groups, not who comes here, not how you get here. What I tell them is that we had to remember the true fabric of America. And this true fabric is built on a whole bunch of immigrants that came here. 40% of them, 40% of people came here and their families are tied directly to Ellis Island. Maybe some of yours are. And so we remember that. And remember that we need to make sure that we have the optimal protection for everyone, because that's what our country is woven by. And that's what I believe is important to the Ann Arbor police officers. So as your leader, I just wanted to kind of give you an idea what we were doing and how things are going with the police department. Obviously, I'll be open for any questions, but I hope you find that the police department is serving you in the best way they can. And always know that as your police chief, I'm going to always do what I think is best in order to move the organization forward, help develop leaders so that in the future we can continue to make Ann Arbor better than it is today, because we have leaders that are up and coming that quite frankly are far better than me. And I just got to get them in the right space in order to move forward. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Chief Anderson. I especially appreciate the note around the need for collaborative partnerships. And I think the way that we think about our climate action and our sustainability work, none of this gets done, and you can't solve any of these problems if you work alone. And so recognizing the strengths that exist across departments, but even outside of the city itself, and working with other organizations. And so appreciate that. And I'm very excited to bring up our last speaker, Brett, who's going to share a little bit of information about the city's comprehensive plan and its many intersections with sustainability. Brett, thank you. Separate presentation here, all good.
My technical support.
There we go.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. It's always it's hard to follow. Very much. My name is Brett Leonard. I'm the planning manager. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's hard to follow Chief, but I'm mostly glad I don't have to follow Chief's daughter. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the city's comprehensive plan. You might have heard something about it. It's been a process that we've been undertaking over the last 3 years, and I'm happy to walk you through what it is and how it relates to the sustainability goals of the city. So the comprehensive land use plan, for those that don't know, we regulate private property through zoning, through regulations. What we do is we enact codes that say what you can build, where you can build it, and how you can build it. And that is the law. That is the details about how we shape what we want to be. The comprehensive land use plan is the aspiration, it's the goals, it's the policy statement that sets the course of what those regulations should be and how we want to evolve as a city. And so that is the fundamental importance of the comprehensive land use plan. After this 3-year process, it changes nothing. It is a aspiration, it is a to-do list, it is a goal. Only those subsequent legislative actions can make actually impactful changes to our zoning districts, to our regulations, and therefore it's a long-range document seeking to shape and steer how the community is going to grow and evolve over a long period of time, in this case towards 2050. When we undertook this process, we didn't do it unguided. Our city council gave us some homework to do as a community as part of this process. They asked us to specifically consider those aspects of the A2ZERO living carbon neutrality plan and how we can use our land use policy to advance those. In the context of a city that is largely developed and over time, they directed us to find new places for housing, new places for development in our community. They asked us to look at simplifying our regulatory structure. Right now we have about 34 different zoning districts. Each one has a little bit unique restrictions on what you can build in those locations. And over time, that can be very inflexible to allow the evolution and flexibility of uses in our communities to make sure that we can adapt with changes and respond to changes in our community and market needs as well. We can't always predict everything. Over the course of my planning career, I've learned new things like microbreweries, things like short-term rentals, things like data centers. Even the best plans cannot always anticipate new challenges that we are gonna have to face as a land use, and so the City Council asked us to really set forth some primary values that gives us the framework about how we can respond to those decisions in the future. In this case, affordability, sustainability, and equity. And then finally, land use regulations and zoning has specifically been used to segregate communities historically. They've been used, zoning has been used to keep classes, incomes of people, races of people from specific areas of cities. And our directive was to make sure that we are doing what we can to undo that and to eliminate the chances that that happens in our community in the future. The plan outlines 12 different goals. I'm going to highlight a couple of them that I think have particular interface with some of the carbon neutrality strategies that you've heard these summarized already through a variety of presentations. I will say when we're talking about these, everything has a place and everything has to have a collaboration and a nexus towards achieving these goals. You heard, for example, from some of my colleagues about how the city has to put its money where its mouth is and really try hard to make sure that the decisions that we're making and the investments that we are making are serving to meet these aspirational goals. We can't always snap our fingers and make others do it either. We have to work within a regulatory framework that we don't always, frankly, have the ability to just demand the things that we aspire to as a community. Sustainability, energy efficiency, affordability, these are things that from a sort of a simple perspectives, it's like, well, why don't we just require it? And well, there's a lot of regulatory and legal reasons why we can't just demand some of these things. So this land use plan is about making sure that we're identifying the opportunities that we do have agency, we do have opportunity to advance some of these goals, and specifically potentially impose some of those on private development within our community. One is housing diversity. As I talked about, this is one of the fundamental goals of the City Council when we initiated this project. And for the majority of our residential areas in the city, we only allow one type of housing typology to be built, and that's a single family home. So this plan, what it does is recognizes that people's needs for housing change, their aspirations and desires for housing change, market pressures are changing. And so we need to adapt to that. And so it specifically talks about advocating for something called the missing middle. Missing middle housing is kind of a urban planning nerd term for housing that used to be fundamental and foundational to communities, and over time we regulated away. When you look at some of the historic neighborhoods around campus and the downtown core, for example, you'll see like courtyard apartments, you'll see multiplexes that were built that way. And over time, we started regulating those away. We started saying that setting policy and regulatory goals that suggested that there was only this one type of housing that was appropriate for the majority of our city, and multifamily should be regulated to only some very specific areas. And so missing middle is a bit of back to developmental roots. How can we start providing a wide variety of housing typologies, sizes, configurations to provide more flexibility and choice for people throughout our community? With that, as we start bringing more people into neighborhoods and our neighborhoods become even more vital, they thrive, and that momentum happens with complete neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods have choices about how they access goods and services. They have choices about how they move in and about their community. They have choices about how they move about to their employment or their recreation or their worship, you name it. And so when we're thinking about the future of the city, we want to do all we can to cultivate that flexibility. Over about the last 50 years, not just here in the city, but broadly across a lot of communities, suburbia happened. And that was in part based by a lot of really intentional decisions by communities to say that residential uses shall not be commingled with other uses. And that's not how we live our lives. We live our lives needing services and goods and employment opportunities. And so complete neighborhoods is an aspiration of this plan to make sure that we are doing the things to start putting together fully functional, flexible neighborhoods that meet a variety of needs for people. Along with those neighborhoods, really leaning into how we link our land use decision-making with our transportation system. You heard the word chicken and egg as it relates to our EV network. Transportation, public transit is actually a really similar example. We have the benefit of a really robust transit system here in the city, one of the preeminent bus systems. With that, there is a chicken and egg balance that happens with those with the functionality of that public transit in our community. That is, as much as I would like for us to be able to just say, we're gonna start running buses along a corridor every 5 minutes. What does that do? That makes public transit a much more viable service for people to live in and about that corridor with reliability, flexibility about when they're gonna access it. But if there isn't the density of users to support that, it's not very efficient to run the bus with that frequency. So there's always this sort of symbiotic relationship where we have to, that service responds to the demand. And what this plan seeks to do is say, okay, what can we do from a demand perspective, from a land use perspective, to start maybe piling on some demand where we already have those corridors, take advantage of those successes, and really start building those as true opportunities for people to move in and about our community. The reason that's important, both from a housing and a transportation perspective, is we have about 75,000 people coming into the city each day to go to work. This is 2021 data. There's no guarantee, of course, that as we provide housing in the city, that everybody who chooses to avail themselves or is able to avail themselves of that housing, that they're gonna walk to work, or they're gonna take the bus to work, or they're gonna ride their bike to work. But right now, of those 75,000 people, most of them don't even have the option. So unless we start seeing like really dramatic shifts in our student enrollment at the University of Michigan, the employment of the University of Michigan, the booming health center, which are all really strong forces of our community, that pressure is going to continue to happen. That pressure of people to come to this as a center. And so as we think about our transportation systems and housing, that is our opportunity to help impact some of those pressures in a really positive way. It's not just regulation. You heard some of the things that are happening. You heard about an upcoming session about social resilience. The plan is not just about regulation. It's also about some of the investments that need to occur in our community, either by the city or by others. It's about infrastructure. It's about support networks. It's about what are the things that we need to do in order to reach the goals that we identify in the plan. Maybe it's entrepreneurial support. Maybe it's social safety net programs. But while a lot of the focus on the comprehensive plan is rightfully focused on land use regulations and what changes are going to happen, it is not solely about that. It also talks about infrastructure. It also talks about other priorities that we as a community need to achieve to reach our goals. As we talk about resource use, this is sort of the goal that's related to that suburbia example that I mentioned. When we can provide a high level of service and density, whether it's jobs, housing, transportation within a confined area, we are doing very good for the sustainability of the region. When we can eliminate transportation costs, often, frankly, also we find that housing units in the city are often smaller. When you start getting into more suburban, rural areas, they are often larger units. So it has a lot of sort of compounding benefits to a sustainability. On the flip side, of course, is we're bringing more of that activity into our city, more to measure, more to evaluate, more to try and offset through our investments. But from a land use perspective, I feel very strongly that one of the things that we can do as a city is be welcoming. We can be welcoming to jobs, to opportunities, to housing, because we can provide, and we have the most potential to provide that in a very efficient way to members of the community in a dense, compact manner, much more than a more spread out manner. This is that future land use map. That is a big part of the plan. I said that one of the goals of the City Council was to simplify our regulatory structure, and this is very simple. Frankly, I'm kind of surprised how simple it is. It's basically 3 significant land use categories: hub, transition, and residential. Again, compared with 34 distinct zoning districts currently in our community. So the opportunity for us to simplify our regulatory structure, provide a lot more flexibility, and one of the things that this plan specifically calls out is the opportunity for housing pretty much across the city and pretty much all zoning districts. So a pretty big change from a more segregated land use policy, and we're going to have a lot of work going forward to figure out how to specifically implement that through the regulatory changes, through the creation of new zoning districts in order to achieve that. This is just an overview. Noteworthy with residential, I said this is the majority of our residential housing across the city only allows one typology, which is single family. This plan calls for setting sort of a base minimum of 3 unit developments in all residential areas in the city. So that's a very big change. This is not unique to Ann Arbor. A lot of communities across the country are starting to do this for very similar reasons: for housing supply, for affordability, providing new housing typologies. I don't anticipate we're going to realize a lot of development in this manner just because of its scale. Most communities still realize the bulk of their development along corridors and in concentrated areas, but nonetheless, it's a very noteworthy change. It is no longer only providing one typology in the greatest percentage of land in the city. So it's going to be really important. And I think it's also another opportunity for us to simplify. We have about probably 10 different residential districts and looking for ways to simplify that so they're more predictable, so that developers, builders, and owners of any scale, not just those that have the most sort of capacity and expertise, will be able to navigate them and be successful in our community. Transition is just that. It's sort of the areas in between our residential and our hubs. This is going to be areas along corridors. Think Packard, think Washtenaw, think Stadium. They are areas that are ideally going to be very responsive to their surroundings. The plan envisions them as zoning districts that the limitations sort of talk to the surrounding land uses. That is, as you get closer to residential, there's going to be more restriction on how high and impactful that development can be. As you get closer in those transition zones to our hub or city center areas, it can be taller, it can be more expansive, it can be more impactful. It's going to be really tricky, frankly, to regulate, but a lot of the city is being proposed for this. It's also a great area for that relationship with transit to start figuring out how we can start amplifying some of the land uses along our existing transit corridors. And then hubs are our tallest and densest land use category in the future land use plan or the comprehensive plan. These are areas like the downtown, like Arbor land, like areas around Briarwood, where we have the greatest potential for higher density development, civic centers, lots of flexibility in uses, lots of flexibility in height, scale, density, and ideally, again, the opportunity to take some of these typologies along some of those transit corridors hopefully will help develop the land use patterns along with the transportation system to start providing real choices for people to move in and about our community. If you want to learn more, you can ask me questions when we get to that shortly, or you can, of course, read the draft plan. The status of the plan is that it has been adopted by the Planning Commission, but now it needs to go to the City Council. That's scheduled for March 16th. My brilliant colleague, Michelle Bennett, has done an episode of Greenlight where we covered a lot of these very similar issues. And if you just want to learn more, you can always reach out to us. This is my colleague, Michelle Bennett's email, but if that's too specific to remember, you can always contact us at planning@a2gov.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. All right. Now I would like to open up the audience for questions and some discussion. If you have a question for any of our panelists this evening, please just raise your hand, and we'll have a mic traveling around the audience, and we'll have a little bit of time for discussion.
Hi, my name is Jan Luft. As some of my friends call me, I'm old Michigan. So my family has been in Michigan since before it was a territory in Monroe County. And so my question, I think, they're gonna go to Brett. About 15 years ago, St. Mary's Academy in Monroe built a new community center, and they used geothermal. So I'm wondering, with all the things that are underway in Ann Arbor, all the things that are planned going forward, are any of these new buildings going to be utilizing geothermal? That's one of my questions. Another question, in energy production up in the Northwest, like Portland area and that, where you have some topography, which Ann Arbor has. We have hills and slopes and things. Are there any drain turbines that are going to be implemented, and even in, the larger storm drains that would generate power when it's raining? That. And the other question I have with the zero carbon thing is, we're in a situation now where we are in contention with Russia and Saudi Arabia to provide energy to Europe. And the US dollar is backed by the value of petroleum. And we have an administration now that is moved away from support for electric vehicles and clean energy. And just recently, which breaks my heart because I have lost family and friends during a very difficult time in Ohio, in Toledo, when Bob Taft and the Republican legislature changed the law and let industry self-regulate. So during the 1990s, from the beginning to 2001, they regularly went over EPA limits, and our sudden death, heart attacks, cancer rates became the highest in the country, and Ohio had the highest in the country. But Lucas County, Toledo, Ohio, not far from here, that people don't know, the death rate just, the obituary pages went from a couple pages to 8 to 10 pages in the Toledo Blade, and it was horrible. So right now I'm very concerned about this just rollback on the EPA. So I love what Ann Arbor is doing. It's a wonderful city, a lot of positive things happening, but it seems like we could be doing more.
Well, I agree, we could be doing more, but we are doing a lot. So let me talk a little bit. There are definitely projects happening with geothermal in the city, but I talked about this a little obtusely, but let me put a finer point on it. We have to work, the way Michigan works is cities are allowed to do what the state allows us to do. They sort of give us our guardrails, and we can do the things within what they provide us to do. One of the things that they do is they don't let us set our own building code regulations. So we have limitations. I can't say to you or anybody else, the only way you're allowed to build this community center, this apartment, or anything else is if you do geothermal. I don't have that hammer. I don't have that stick. We do have carrots, and that's how we often do it. And so we are having some success with that in some cases where there's some sort of discretionary aspect of a development. For example, one of the things that we often do is we say, hey, you can build X, but you can build X plus if you give the city these benefits or you respond in these ways. One of the ways we can do that is by trying to incentivize sustainable power or geothermal or what have you, or even energy efficiency. Even that, though, is always a trade-off because even, again, with a community that's doing a lot, I am so grateful for the community to have resources like the sustainability millage, the affordability millage, but it's not always a zero-sum game. There has to be trade-offs at times, and so sometimes we're able to overcome those trade-offs and really come up with a really innovative outcome, and sometimes there's still going to be a gap, and unfortunately fortunately or unfortunately, we're not always able to achieve everything we want, but oftentimes we're able to achieve a lot of what we want. It's like everything else is complex, but I think we are making some positive movement towards that, particularly when the city is a more primary investor, like in some of the affordable housing projects that our Innovative Housing Commission has been doing. Those are almost all geothermal because we have the agency and the ability to decide to do that as opposed to imposing it upon somebody else. So baby steps, but I can't speak to drain turbines. I'm just no expert on it. My initial thought is that it's probably pretty new and it probably requires some balance of the investment and regular storm impact in order for that to work. Maybe we have that sort of infrastructure and conditions here. I'm just no expert on it. And I don't know if anybody from OSI wants to talk about how terrible things are federally right now in the petroleum-based dollar as it relates to, I mean, I guess that relates to some of the EV rollout and the infrastructure. I guess some people might be thinking about that, but I liked what he said. It's a question of when, not if, but I guess that can be in doubt right now.
Yeah, well said, Brett. All I'd add is, in addition to what we do sort of in terms of our infrastructure projects, there's a lot our office does, working behind the scenes with, our advocacy agencies and that sort of thing to try to address those challenges that you highlighted. And I appreciate you bringing up drain turbines. I'm always interested in some of these novel technologies, so it's definitely something I'll look into. Yep, and sort of on the flip side, we're pumping lots of things up those hills as well, and that's part of the high sort of electricity demand we see with our water infrastructure.
I might just jump onto that comment around, what we can do. I think that as a city, we really think about what we do within the regulatory landscape, have the capacity to do, and if we have the capacity to do it, we're pursuing it, we're exploring it. I think the Sustainable Energy Utility Project and Initiative is a really good example of that. There are a lot of limitations to deploying renewable energy, solar being one of them, which has recently been impacted by the rollback of tax credits. But we're pursuing this new approach where we can have city-owned solar, which can be deployed rapidly across the city. And so on one hand, it's identifying what some of those barriers are and trying to remove those barriers if they're coming up from a federal level. What can we do in our own community? And as Sydney said, we have a lot of lawyers also that work for the city that provide testimony and are actively involved in some of this work external to the city. But we do what we can with what we have in the city as well.
Hi. This question may be for all of you, but what made me think of it was what Brett was talking about in terms of the 75,000 incoming commuters, which is data from 21. Was that correct? So the blanket question is, I know you're all trying to work from the most accurate recent data possible, and I'm just wondering from from a base from a base of how you operate and are you modeling to, I mean, it would be much of a challenge to model the data for current commutation, for example, anyway, in just, notwithstanding that 21, we were just coming out of COVID, and there's been a very, there's been a volatile situation since then. So I'm wondering, is there a particular challenge with modeling the data you have to update it for current levels, or are you confident enough that what you have is enough to build on so that you'll be able to be flexible when the new data comes in?
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that. It's always a challenge. I honestly, I'll take some ownership from this. I'm always surprised how hard sometimes it is to get the data out of our own systems that I'm looking for. We have a lot of great technology. We got a lot of great people, but sometimes just the way we set up systems, they might be more customer service and user oriented than data focused, or because we are having sort of like self-service, we're relying on data that we can't always validate because we're not necessarily inputting it. And so but I think we do have the data to do modeling. For example, as it relates to some of the land use planning, one of the things that we're really fortunate right now is that our colleagues in the public services divisions, you saw some of the highlight renewable energy projects, but more comprehensively, they're doing a lot of analysis of some of our infrastructure systems. And so part of that is projecting, okay, planner Brett, you've got this, you and the Planning Commission have this plan with new density, so we need to talk about where it's going to be located and what are the pipes looking like in those areas. And so, all of these aspirations have to be pinned to also our analysis about, can we provide the infrastructure support that? Can we provide the water, the sanitary, the stormwater for all those things? And so, it's not perfect, but I'll tell you from all the organizations that I work with, I feel that the city is pretty well positioned as far as the data that we have and the capability to put it together. And when you go home and peruse that comp plan while you're getting ready for bed tonight, you're going to see a lot of commitment to metrics in it. Because when we're talking about housing and when we're talking about affordability, we have to be honest with ourselves about what are we achieving and what are we not achieving. And so from my perspective, it's never perfect, but I think we are well suited to respond to changes. Not 100%, but I don't think that's our gap. I think our biggest challenge is probably some of the regulatory limitations that we have, and frankly, just making the decisions. Sometimes we have to make trade-off decisions, and those things can be hard.
Hi, I'm a university student, and a lot of my friends take the bus solely because there are no parking spots. I was just curious from a city planning perspective, how in your plans to expand housing, change the housing types, all of that, how do you manage like the demand for things like parking and paved spaces? And I don't know, in a pointed way, I would hope that you maybe continue to constrain those, and thinking about how the design influences behavior through constraints rather than opportunity, and what the university has to say about that.
I got some bad news for you. We don't. We used to identify every potential use in the city, and we would allocate what the city deemed was the required parking for those uses. So if you were a restaurant, it was X spaces per number of seats. If you were a church, it was X spaces per how many people you could sit in pews. If it's an office, et cetera. And one of the things that's happened, and you experienced this as with your relationship with the university, is that frankly our networks are pretty taxed right now because of those 75,000 people. And one of the things that's happened from a policy perspective is we have to be pretty smart about how we use our land. We don't prohibit parking, but we are no longer in the business of pretending that we know how many parking spaces those uses need. We're going to leave those to the businesses, the residential developers, the homeowners, and what we want to do is do what we can to put that valuable space towards space for people, space for employment, space for services, so that, because that's pretty much, that's our opportunity to relieve some of that. If, on the flip side, if we continue to require X number of parking spaces for every time a development happens, we are dedicating land to car storage. And as it relates to uses, we are perpetuating and adding momentum to that thread of cars from 7 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. every morning along Washtenaw and Plymouth and State. And those networks they're taxed. I think it's time for us to start thinking about what's happening within the land use perspective that we can do, because we've got great transportation engineers on staff at the city. I'm not one of them, but one of the things I can do is try to do what I can to maybe slow the rate of the trips on those roadways in cars, or ideally reduce some of it. You heard there's an aspirational goal that 50% of the vehicle miles traveled in the city is reduced. That's with all due respect to my community and my buses, that's crazy. Half of all vehicular trips, but that's what it takes. It takes that aspirational goal to make sure that we're making the hard decisions to move towards it. Because we're not gonna, without that, think about your worst experience on a traffic jam corridor, and it's just going to get worse as the university grows, as the health center grows, and unless those roads become highways, it's just going to get worse and worse. Our best strategy from a land use perspective is start linking more and more of those trips closer so that people have choice.
Hello, I'm resident along Miller Avenue, and I wanted to figure out what is going on with Miller Avenue, because they suddenly changed it from a 3-lane to a 2-lane with speed bumps and 25 miles an hour and put this extra lane that I don't understand what it's about.
Bike lane.
But the other thing was regarding your development plan, where you can say you can do multiple 3 people on there. And Arbor has this tendency to tax at best usage rather than current usage. And so there was, I had friends that lived out near Huron High School that had to start, because once they zoned it so that it could allow for multiple residential, he had to start selling off his land every year in order to pay the taxes, because they raised it to best usage. And so first of all, is Miller Avenue, which I'm along, is that considered one of the high traffic zones that would be open for that? And 2, if that does pass, where you can do 3 on my property on there, am I going to be taxed at 3 while I'm still a single, or am I still going to be able to be taxed at my current usage?
Yeah.
Because of this history of taxing at best.
Yeah. Well,
So if you could explain what's going on with Miller, if it's considered high traffic, and will I be liable for that expansion?
yeah, good question. So Miller is a great example of trade-offs and balance and trying to find opportunities to meet a lot of goals in a small area. From a land use perspective, the plan calls for the portion of Miller sort of closest to downtown to be one of the transition zones. I'll get with you afterwards, but I think it stops somewhere around Mac School, maybe, yeah, that area. And then from that out west, until you get to Maple, it's residential. Taxing is talking about one of the things the state allows us to do. Taxing is actually a pretty constrained thing. The city doesn't have a lot of ability to just change how we tax your property or anybody else's property. If that property is rezoned, we don't have the ability to tax you based on what your property is worth. Under state law, there's these 2 sort of really constraining acts that work together. They're Proposal A and the Headley Amendment. And these 2 things actually really constrain municipalities from being able to raise revenue to maintain the cost of service delivery as inflation increases, because they conspire to say that the city can't raise your taxes regardless of the value of your property. If your value today is $200,000 and a rezoning happens and suddenly your property is worth $1 million, we can't tax you on that. No matter how much your property increases in value, we can't increase the taxable value of your property by more than the rate of inflation. And so that constrains cities from being able to tax based on the true market value of property. But it also helps you as a property owner be more secure, be more stable in the costs associated with your property. One of the things that happens, though, is somebody might have heard people talk about a property being uncapped. When the property sells, the city can then assess it to what the market value is. And that also creates a real housing challenge for our community, because as more and more people, many people get caught, if you will, or trapped in the Proposal A benefit, keeping their taxes down in a house that might be larger than they want, or than some other aspect of the house than what they would prefer somewhere else. But if they move, the property that they buy is uncapped. And so they might, like if I am, as an empty nester, my wife and I want to downsize from what was our family household into something smaller. Over time, that Proposal A is a tremendous financial incentive for me to stay in that bigger house than to go buy a smaller house, because the taxes might be equal or more. And so it's a real factor. But I'd be happy to learn more, but I would be surprised that there was anything about the value of property that was caused your acquaintance to be selling property. It might be other things like the city adding millages. When the voters add, say, a parks millage or a sustainability millage or affordability millage, that is being additive, and it's starting to add cost to what the property taxes are. So it's complex, but that's the best I can explain about how the property taxes work. And the land use plan is not going to have an immediate impact on your property. If you develop your property as 3 units or a duplex, then it would impact your property. But just the zoning change, but just the zoning changing would not have that impact.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. I know there may be more. If you stick around, might be able to snag one of the speakers for a quick question. But before we depart tonight, I just wanted to say a couple final things. I really just wanted to highlight that the work that we're highlighting in tonight's forum is just the smallest slice of everything that's going on in the city. There are so many other departments and offices and initiatives that we would love to talk about, from solid waste, water, parks, forestry, housing commission, fire emergency management, clerk's office. There's so many that we could talk about that intersect with A2ZERO and our sustainability efforts. And really our office has the privilege of working across these different departments. And so again, just encouraging you to think about the broad scale of the city and the work that's being done behind the scenes. And we were happy to share a snippet of it, but there's much more. If you would like to stay engaged with us, there's a couple things I just want to quickly highlight. Would love for you to check out our monthly newsletter. This month was highlighting, again, municipal operations, which was one of the connections to tonight's topic. We'd love for you to follow us on social media. And just shameless plug that Simi has a few posts, and they're some of our favorite posts. So give us a follow at A2ZERO 2030. In terms of a couple upcoming events, we will have a monthly clothing swap at City Hall on Thursday, March 19th from 4 to 7 p.m., which we'd love for you to check out. And then again, the next forum in this series is going to be Tuesday, actually, sorry, that's a typo, Tuesday, March 31st, the last Tuesday of the month, from 6 to 7:30 p.m. right in this room. And we'll also be hanging out at the table for just a couple more minutes afterward. So thank you all again for attending. My very last request is that if you are open and willing, we would love for you to scan this QR code and take just like 60 to 90 seconds to fill out a couple questions that just helps us better understand where you came from, how you found out about this event tonight, and better ways that we can get information about events and communicate with you. So if you're open to filling that out, we greatly appreciate it. But once again, thank you for joining us tonight and sharing your time. And we hope you have safe travels home. Thanks, everyone.